Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Saker speaking. Well, I've been thinking about human rights and what a bedrock of tyranny it's become. This self-determination is wreaking havoc globally, nationally. We have self-determination of LGBTQ1+. We have self-determination of Indigenous. We have self-determination of Extinction Rebellion. We got self-determination of Black Lives Matter. We've got the white privilege. We've got decolonization. We've got co-governance. Co-governance is just one step towards Maori sovereignty. I say that because I go back to Doug Graham's speech in 1995 in Parliament when he spoke about the Maori Council, who was going to APEC to get them to support them for New Zealand to be established as a Maori sovereign. New Zealand, Maori sovereign nation, the state of Maori sovereign nation. Can you imagine it, people? You think about that. The state of Aotearoa, the Maori nation. I've thought about that, and I thought about the co-governance, and I've wondered, are we on the road to that, as the Maori Council wanted that to be? And what was Doug Graham's response to that? He said, look here, you want New Zealand to be a Maori sovereign state, then you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't have the treaty as well. Because the Maori chiefs actually ceded sovereignty to the Queen of England. So he also questioned, were other Maori behind them? Did they support them? Did they support the Maori Council? Did the Maori Council want to make Maori laws? He questioned all that in the House, verbally speaking about the thoughts in his head. And this is what he said. So already the Maori Council had sought to establish a sovereign Maori nation. So going on to the League of Nations. 1923, the League of Nations were talking about self-determination, Indigenous. In fact, it wasn't Indigenous, they were natives. Indigenous came a bit after. Then in 1982, there was work being done on this plan for the UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, and for 25 years it was being worked on. The Maori Party were part of that. Moana Jackson was part of that, as were others, including Claire Charters, the Professor of Law, Auckland University, Human Rights Commission, all part of that 25 years. In 2007, the UNDRIP, some call it UNDRIP or UNDRIP, was introduced into the UN Assembly, officially. But Horomaya, Minister of Maori Affairs, gave a talk in Parliament and warned the Maori, look, This would mean, by actually adopting this, that we would have two classes of citizens in New Zealand. It wasn't compatible with the legalities of the Constitution and the Treaty of Waitangi, that Maori would own the entire country of New Zealand and would be seeking redress, compensation for that land, and that land was already owned legally by Maori and non-Maori. This could not be done, he said. In 2007, in the UN, a representative from New Zealand spoke out for the New Zealand government, and they rejected the UNDRIP, said they could not agree. They reject 4 provisions of that declaration. Provisions number 19, 26, 28, and 32. And it was spoken about in the Assembly why that is. And for the same reasons, as Jeremiah said, plus Maori would have veto rights that no others had. They would have veto rights over the laws of New Zealand. They would be able to control the natural resources of New Zealand. And much more. So they would have control of New Zealand. It would seriously violate property rights. There were many reasons that were given why this could not happen. It was undemocratic, incompatible with the treaty, with the legalities, the Constitution of New Zealand. And it was totally rejected. But in 2010, John Keyes made arrangements with Peter Sharples, co-leader of the Maori Party, to go to the UN to actually adopt this for New Zealand. And this has progressed and progressed into what you now know as co-governance. Self-determination. Self-determination for Indigenous peoples. And it's been called, the UNDRP has been called, a document of aspiration. Jeremiah called it toothless. The UN representative said, look, people are not looking at it as a legal document to act upon. Nations are not looking at it like that. They're looking at it as a document of aspiration. And time and time again, you hear that document of aspiration. Now, the bureaucrats and the government, you've got Labour, Greens, Maori Party, are right behind us. I have heard Winston Peters speak up against it. I've heard that party speak against it, and Judith Collins certainly speaks against it. But John Key actually did this secretly. There's never been any debate about this. So what it's being said by many, Maori and non-Maori, that because of the 1835 Declaration of Independence, that sovereignty of New Zealand wasn't ceded to the Queen of England. That's wrong, because when the treaty was signed in 1840, it actually annulled that 1835 Declaration of Independence. And there was no partnership documented on the Treaty of Waitangi of 1840. So first of all, when that was signed, New Zealand became a colony of New South Wales. Then the following year became the Dominion. And then later on, the New Zealanders became known as New Zealanders, and even before that, we got our independence. Parliament got its independence. The government got its independence to make its own laws and legislations. And this is what's happened. But so the other thing is, the government doesn't mention the convention at Komarimara, the mission house in Auckland, in Komarimara, on the waterfront down near Mission Bay, where 112 chiefs gathered in 1860 to discuss the treaty, to discuss what was been happening in New Zealand over that period of 20 years from 1840 to 1860, how they felt about it all, what disharmonies, what was happening, and they were left uninterrupted to speak about that and to come back to Governor Brown and tell him what they felt, to report back. So what you heard, 112 Maori tribal chiefs that met, and what came out of that was many chiefs said, oh, look, we look at Governor Brown, we look at Governor Hobson as our father, the Queen as our mother, and they mentioned the education that was being brought, and the missionaries for their Christianity and the stopping of wars, protecting our shores from foreign invaders. And even several chiefs actually said that some Europeans had been murdered by some Maori, and that they had sought revenge on those Maori for doing that, and they saluted those that had come to New Zealand. Now, go online, have a look at the Komarimara Convention at the Mission House in Auckland. Look to see what is said there. The praise, how they were glad they had the laws that stopped the tribal wars, where Governor Brown had said, look, the Queen will protect you, and she will, but she cannot protect Maori from themselves. And that's what she said, what he said. So that's just a rundown of that. But what I see in New Zealand is human rights has become the bed of tyranny because of all these revolutionary liberation movements that seek determination, demand determination, even aggressively so. And you can see that now at these stop co-governance meetings of Julian Bachelors, the aggressiveness at Posey Parker. You see it all coming out. So human rights, self-determination has become a tyranny. So wake up, New Zealand. This is what we've got happening worldwide in New Zealand. And bureaucrats, Labour, Green Party, organisation, NGOs, individuals, Willie Jackson, the National Iwi Chairs Forum, the Human Rights Commission, they're all on this bedrock promoting this tyranny of human rights. Wake up, New Zealand.